Crime is down in the transit system, but there is one crime category that is still up, and that is the category of felony assault. And the victims are not only riders, but the police officers sent underground.
So, as our leaders try and reassure us that the subway is getting safer, it's actually getting more dangerous for police, who are now being targeted at greater rates than we've seen in a long time. And if the police are in trouble down here, pretty soon we're all gonna have big problems.
New York City police officers are making arrests in record numbers underground, in stepped-up patrols on the trains, on the platforms, and at the turnstiles. But as they do, they're becoming crime victims themselves.
Contributing to the rise in felony assaults is the disturbing and unacceptable dramatic increase in the number of NYPD cops being assaulted, all while proactively patrolling the subway system.
They just need more places for people with mental illness to be able to live in and take their medicine and things like that, because we need more help with people with mental illness here.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why I don't take it after 9 p.m.
Suspects in both those recent high-profile cases were promptly arrested, thanks in part to an already heavy police presence in the subway system and an extensive network of MTA cameras. It's these types of crimes riders say worry them the most.
You see how I'm, positioned here so I won't get pushed off the train?
But officers are under orders to enforce so-called quality-of-life offenses, like fare beating. And as they do, they're often confronted by the unstable people who are menacing riders.
With 700 blades being seized on the train so far this year, it makes you wonder just how safe we really are down here. Because what nobody in charge of this place will admit is that all of this points to a subway system that isn't getting safer, but is rather teetering on the edge of collapse. And before we get into what's causing this and why it's only getting worse, we better do it quickly, because if you look around at all the rust and decay down here, it very well could be that this entire place collapses before the end of this video. It's incredibly old, which doesn't make any sense, because not only is this America's most dangerous public transit system, it's also the most expensive. And it doesn't help that the subway is also the full-time residence of some 4,000 individuals the city has left to fend for themselves, many of whom are sadly dealing with mental health issues, but also happen to be armed, making them a danger to themselves and possibly others. And when you add to that an agitated base of perpetual criminals roaming the subway looking to assault and rob others, there's a level of lawlessness down here that won't disappear even with more police than ever on patrol. And that brings us to the real reason police are now being targeted. They're getting up every day, putting on their uniforms to protect the general public from people who probably shouldn't be down here at all. Because not only do our laws mandate most of the people police arrest be released without bail, they also mandate that anyone who needs long-term mental health intervention be involuntarily committed, but only for a mere 72 hours in most cases, putting our police in an impossible no-win situation, constantly dealing with the same people, even though these are folks who oftentimes have a frightening track record of unpredictable behavior. And sadly, as you're about to see, if the police aren't safe down here, nobody is. So we've been hearing for a long time about how the subway is safer than it's ever been. But perhaps that's just because police have been putting themselves between us and the criminals down here, which reveals something very troubling. The danger down here still exists. It's everywhere. It's all around us. It's just being drawn to the officers who are down here to protect us. And that's turned this place into a ticking time bomb.
Assaults on New York cops now patrolling subways in larger numbers are up by 152% over the last 5-year period. Attacks are also up on transit workers. The MTA claims.
So when a normal person sees police down here in the subway, we feel safer. We don't think anybody would be stupid enough to try anything with them around, but as it turns out, that's not the case at all. Cops are out here making arrests, stepping up patrols, actually trying to clean up the subway, but criminals are fighting back. And apparently this has been a trend since 2022, when assaults against police suddenly jumped. And today, 1 in 3 felony assaults is against a police officer. And you've got to wonder, if somebody's willing to assault a police officer, what chance do you or I have if we encounter that person? Not much, and look at this. Although the city insists crime down here is decreasing, there is one particular crime that just won't disappear, and that would be the crime of assault. Assaults are 55% higher today than they were in 2019. And although I'm not sure what other crimes the city is including in its statistics to bring down the overall number, assaults are a crime that most people riding the subway are really alarmed about, and riders are now 50% more likely to have a problem with an assault than they were just a few years ago. And if the crimes that really put people in danger are up, is it safer down here even if the overall level of crime is down? No, it's not any safer down here. In fact, as we're learning, it's possible for overall crime to go down while the levels of danger down here go up. Just ask the police, who are now the victims of a crime wave they're supposed to stop.
Arrests are 100% up, especially people being stopped for fare evasion, honestly. And some of those people who apparently got used to the idea that fare evasion was a God-given right, then haul off cops.
So that's the head of the MTA, and he's shocked that police are now being targeted. But there's a problem with this outrage, because when subway crime affects you or I or any customer of the MTA, he says it's all in their head. But I'm thankful he's not telling the police that the crime they're experiencing is in their heads. Now, obviously, the head of the MTA's in a tough spot. It's an election year in New York City, and he's got to play nice with everybody, both riders and politicians, which has got to be like jumping through hoops of fire every time the news cameras are pointed at you. But he brings up a very frightening statistic. All these assaults on police are taking place when they go about combating a problem progressives say isn't a big deal, and that would be fare evasion, something that costs the city $800 million a year when people go through turnstiles like this without paying. Or these right here, which were actually introduced to decrease fare evasion because the thought was they'd be so easy to use, nobody would jump. If you're wondering, this is one of those expensive pilot programs the city spends its money on instead of hiring more police to keep us safe down here. But we're constantly told by progressives that fare evasion's not a big deal. In fact, these are the same people who believe that all public transit should just be free. But studies show that oftentimes folks who've evaded the fare then go on to commit a much more egregious crime once they're inside the subway. And now we hear from the head of the MTA himself that folks evading the fare are also the ones engaging in combat with law enforcement when they get busted, revealing that a lot of what goes on down here is not only not victimless, the victims of those crimes just so happen to be whoever the criminal first encounters.
In 1997, there were 17 felonies a day. Last year, just 6. But officers are under orders to enforce so-called quality of life offenses, like fare beating. And as they do, they're often confronted by the unstable people who are menacing riders. Felony assault.
So here we go again with the news telling us that major crimes are down, but you've also got this perpetual mass of people who aren't afraid of anybody or anything, and assaults are simultaneously up. And a big component of this nobody's talking about are how overall levels of lawless behavior down here are skyrocketing. You've got people sleeping, lounging about on platforms, engaging in disruptive behavior for no reason, and the city just lets all of that go. And although criminal sympathizers don't want to admit it, rampant disorder just attracts more criminals and more lawless behavior, not less. In fact, since we're now punishing less crime than ever before, we're creating an army of entitled criminals. And we shouldn't be surprised when they lash out at the authorities the one rare instance where they do get confronted about doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And this is going to wear out and demoralize our officers. They can't put up with being the brunt of a crime wave forever. And once they're gone, that crime wave is just going to go back to targeting people like you and me.
33% of the felony assaults, the victims are police officers. 7% of the victims are transit workers. And MTA officials said today that many of those arrested are repeat offenders, some with multiple arrests in the same year. Well, tonight.
Isn't that crazy? As a police officer in this city, it's your job today to arrest the same person you arrested yesterday for the same thing they did yesterday. And although most proponents of law and order disagree with progressives who say criminals will learn lessons from this constant arrest and release cycle. The criminals who make it down here are learning lessons, all right. They're learning how to interact with police and evade them and the limits of their power to arrest and detain someone, which is not what we want. We don't want criminals learning how to evade law enforcement and get better at breaking the law, but that's what happens since they never seem to wind up in jail for what they do. And the other problem contributing to a sense of lawlessness down here is the fact that New York City's laws handicap those tasked with assisting the mentally ill from actually caring for them. Many individuals down here are in need of long-term treatment, but in many cases our laws mandate people be discharged from facilities before anything's been accomplished, sometimes after just a few days, which leads to the same people coming back down here to do the same things and engage in the same behavior, contributing to that overall level of lawlessness that we all experience the moment we enter this place. But luckily for people who ride the trains and use the subway in a law-abiding fashion, there is now an ultimate authority figure taking an interest in what's going on down here. And that authority figure would be the federal government, who's now going to step in and force New York City to make some changes down here. So the reason so much crime takes place down in the subway is because for years, it's never been anybody's fault that things have been this way. Nobody's ever been held accountable, but that's about to change because New York City now has to share its crime data with the federal government, who gives it money to run the subway. And the federal government's made it clear that if they don't see evidence New York City is taking steps to make things better and safer underground, they might not be footing the bill much longer, which could result in the MTA that runs the subway having less money to experiment with different types of evasion-resistant gates, or less money in general to make repairs and even run the subway.
The Trump administration threatening to cut billions of dollars in federal funding to the MTA over subway crime. The letter from the Department of Transportation did not include a specific amount that could be cut, but said consequences could include redirecting or withholding.
So the city losing its ability to just waste money on what is a black hole of financial investment, that could actually be a good thing. Now, the federal government hasn't said how much money the city's subway could lose or what they'll end up doing with it. For example, they've mentioned that funding could be redirected and, say, used for only purposes of law enforcement and safety, which would force the people running the subway to find their own money to make desperately needed repairs, instead of installing bizarre benches like this at stations where many people in the past have been found sleeping. Why else would they build something like this, which you can't even sit down on? Unless it was your mission to waste money on things that don't actually help people who don't have a place to stay. But the most unbelievable aspect of this is, even though everybody knows the subway is not in a good place right now, our leaders are still out there defending it, even though assaults are up 55% in general and up over 150% on police.
I feel like the kid who gets called on the teacher when you actually done your homework. We have done so much to improve subway safety.
MTA Chair Jano Lieber is seeming to adopt a what me worry attitude about the latest round of threats from the Trump administration. Transportation Secretary.
So I think I'm starting to feel bad for the head of the MTA. Earlier, he just told us how shocked he was that police were now in trouble, but he's also out there telling us he's done everything, so much, to make it safer down here that your head will spin. And I don't want to give him a hard time, but if you went to school and you spent a long time on your homework, but it's all wrong, the effort you've spent doesn't offset the F that gets stamped on your paper. In fact, the only recent safety initiative we can point to is the deployment of more police down here, and now assaults against police are up, so it's not really working, is it? On top of that, service is absolutely atrocious. You've got systemic delays pretty much all the time now, making it pretty hard for people to actually see the results of the $20 billion a year this place gets. On the bright side, officers are doing a great job removing blades from the subway system. And oftentimes they say the people they find with weapons come in through the emergency gates, jump over the turnstiles, and they say that by failing to enforce those types of violations, potentially dangerous individuals are allowed to roam free in the subway. Yet, as we're now learning, arresting people over and over again for the exact same types of crimes is just a band-aid solution at best for a long-term crime problem that's just getting worse.
I'm not concerned. We have actually the lowest number of daily crimes in the subway system than we have ever had in recorded history in the first part of this year.
A spokesman for Governor Hochul said her first priority is public safety, which is why she surged more than 1,000.
So it's hard to blame our leaders for having viewpoints like this. After all, we've got mayoral elections this year and a governor's election next year. They're just trying to look and sound their best. But nobody's out there going after our laws, which have created all of the problems taking place down here. After all, a system that just arrests people over and over again and doesn't put them in jail only trains those people to avoid arrest in the future. And a system that allows repeat offenders unlimited chances to come back to the scene of the crime will never right itself automatically. On top of that, all the recent decreases in crime our leaders point to could actually be fake. And let me tell you something, when you're down here trying to use the subway, it certainly feels like they're fake. And look, I'm not defending the officer who got caught doing this, but he's probably under a lot of pressure to come up with numbers that make it look like those that are in charge of him are doing a good job down here. And if you're a cop right now, you're in a lose-lose situation. The people running this city don't want there to be actual solutions because there never have been any. And they greatly dislike the president who's coming to the table now, forcing them to fix the crime problems in America's largest and most dangerous public transit system. And here you are as a cop, you're on the side of law and order, while those who tell you what to do may not necessarily be. What do you think our police are gonna do? Are they ever gonna be able to stop crime down here without meaningful changes to our laws? And now that the federal government is threatening to take money away from New York City, could we finally see changes that make the subway a safer place for everyone down here, including those who really need help and just aren't getting it? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.